Welcome to the TufFish Show. I am so excited to present to you Shayla Raquel. Shayla, thank you so much for being on the show. I am so excited to have you.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. I love doing these shows. I love doing podcasts. I love everything being off the cuff. Like for me, I don't get to see, they've told me before in the past, you want to see your questions at a time. Like, no, let's just do it. Don't show me anything. I want to be surprised. So I love doing shows like this. It's very fun for me. Thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. So I would love for you to start then I know you're a writer. I know you're a marketer, an editor, all different hats. So a businesswoman, but yeah. I would love to know how you got started in writing.
Oh man. So my mom and I argue on this one a lot. I say that I wanted to be a writer at age 16. She says it was age 8. And there is some validity to that because I was journaling all the time, which like who isn't really, as a young girl, you love having a diary, and I was writing poetry and it was just ghastly, but I really enjoyed it and it was fun. And by the time I turned 16, I had it in my mind that I was going to be an actress. Oh yeah. And so my mom, ever supportive, sent me off to speech and drama camp in Florida to help me, learn more about acting. And I was the worst actress in the world. A lot of that comes from the fact that I'm a terrible liar, just an awful, it's terrible. So while I was there, I did realize that I was pretty good at writing plays and writing a team song and coming up with the cover for like our little pamphlet. And I realized like this is something I've always done for fun. Maybe this is something I want to do. So when I came back home, oh my goodness, I grabbed every single book I could in the library on writing, including the titled book On Writing by Stephen King. Yep. And I just ate it up. And I was in such a hurry to become a writer that I did double the work so I could graduate high school a year early, just so I could like start college as soon as possible. And I was a writing major with an advertising minor. And by the time it was a month before I turned 21, I was offered a copywriter position at a publishing company, and I jumped on it. And 6 months later, they asked me to be a copy editor. And nice. I told them, I actually drafted the email that said, oh, I need to pass, even though I desperately wanted the job because I had it in my head, oh, I'm too young, I'm too this, I'm not good enough. And thankfully, I changed my mind and I said, yeah, I'd like to take the test. And I took a copy editor test. And to this day, I remember I lowercase the word Nazi, which is capitalized. And that was one of the ones I missed. I don't remember the other 3. And then I just fell into editing and I loved it. It was so fun for me. And by the year 2013, April, actually, I started my own company. So I've been at this for, oh, wow. So it'll be 11 years in August. And yeah, so let's not do the math on like how old I am. Let's not worry about that. I had so much fun starting my own company, and there was just so much to it that I knew zilch about. But I was just really crazy about working with authors. And I just decided like, I got to do this and I'll figure it out. And I started my company in 2013, and I've been doing editing, marketing, self-publishing mentorships, book launches, speaking engagements. It's just a blast for me. I have a lot of fun with it. It can get overwhelming and you can experience burnout like you can with anything else, even your dream job. But that's basically my story. So it's just been really fun. And I think one of the really great things about being able to work one-on-one with authors, they become some of my closest friends. Like I'm talking, I'll wind up staying at their house if I'm in town, like those type of friends. And I just feel like when working for a publisher, I didn't get to have that one-on-one with the authors. Never. I didn't get to talk to them. So being able to do that on my own is just, it's so much fun. It's great. So that's my story.
I love that. You and I have very similar backgrounds in a way, because like you, I have an undergrad mine's in journalism, so communication.
Okay, yeah,
but writing, yeah.
I loved my journalism classes. Oh my goodness, I love them. Love them.
And I worked at a publishing company, but I was a consultant, and in that case, I was helping clients to take data back. But like you, I love those relationships. Those relationships mattered. And I love seeing someone grow and have been
and you feel
accomplished.
like, yeah, and you wind up having these teary-eyed moments too on certain books where like when you get your own copy, you're like, I know what went into this, and you're so happy for them. And I think that is just a really cool thing with my job, getting those signed copies sent to me and like the thank yous that are in there. And I'm like,
oh, I know.
I'm so glad you like it. That's because it's just so much that goes into a book. There's so much. And it's really cool to be a part of that.
Oh my gosh. Absolutely. Absolutely. You took the words right out of my mouth. I love that. So you mentioned something earlier, and I would love for you to talk a little bit about this, please, which is, as you know, in the coaching space, it's affectionately called imposter syndrome. But basically, I affectionately call that like your inner editor, not somebody who's trying to truly help, but that kind of little voice on the inside going, who do you think you are to write this book? What in the world is that? You are not a writer, or you can't write, or your spelling is this. What do you think you're going to do? So that little voice can sometimes be helpful, but a lot of times it can hold us back. And it sounds like it was something that might have happened earlier in your path, but
very early. Yeah.
But you overcame it. Would you talk a bit about that and how you overcame it?
So back to the email where I wrote it up and I was like, okay, I'm just going to say thank you, but there's no way, like, what are people thinking? And so I think I called my mom and she didn't answer. And so I called my sister and I told her, like, what do I do? They want me to apply for it. And she goes, well, just apply for it and then figure it out later. And I was like, figure what out? She's like, well, just figure out how to edit after you get the job. And I'm like, okay. So I take this editing test, and I do have to mention this story. So take the editing test. A few days later, supervisor says, hey, can I talk to you in my office? And she goes, we want to offer you the copy editor position. And I'm not kidding you. I said, didn't I fail the test? Because I had in my mind that I failed. And she kind of shook her head. She goes, no, on average, our editors missed 14. You only missed 4. And I was like, what? Are you sure? And I was so young and just so naive. And I was like, you better check that again, And I really doubted my own ability. Clearly I did, because I just assumed I failed it, like, oh, I probably failed. And I think that really was such a foundational moment for me, because it was this moment where it's like, no, like, you did great, have a little more confidence in yourself. And as the years went on, I would fall into imposter syndrome. But I think for me, my biggest problem was, here I am, an editor. If I go publish my novel, what if people read it and they hate it so much that they don't want to hire me to edit their own books? That was my big, big issue. And thankfully I overcame that. But as far as like, how did I overcome it? It's really just leaping and doing it. And then you just kind of bite your nails for a little bit and you see reviews coming in. You're like, oh, maybe I'm not half bad after all. Like, you do need to hear those things. You do need to be reassured. And as far as like imposter syndrome, I pulled this up on my computer because it's such a great quote. So I just wanted to read it to you real quick. It's by Grant Faulkner, who I don't know if he still is, but he was the executive director for National Novel Writing Month. This is from his book, Pep Talks. And he said, one of the worst things you can do to mangle the exquisite beauty of your creative spirit is to compare yourself to another. And I think about that quote so much. I've used it so many times because that was my issue. I would go and compare, like, well, look how well this person did. I'm not going to be as good as they are. And that was such a waste of my time. I needed to focus on my beginning, not somebody else's middle. So I knew over time that, okay, I'm an okay writer. Like, I'm pretty good, right? But I would get into my head and I would be like, yeah, but, you're not that great. And you should have said this, and what about, and it's just such a waste of time. Like, just don't do that. So I think there is an issue where if you're both an editor and a writer, it can be hard on your psyche because you want people to respect you as both an author and an editor, and there's this fear that, well, what if they read it? What if a client reads my book and like hates it and then they don't want to hire me? Just so we're clear, that's never happened that I know of, but it is true. Imposter syndrome is very, very real. And I hate that so many authors have to go through it, but I also feel like it's a badge of honor. Like, you go through it and then you're like, you know what? No, I got this. I got this. And I also think hearing feedback from my peers who are writers, like in a writers group, helped me a lot, because they were able to say, oh, I wish I could write dialogue like you. I can't write dialogue like that. That's awesome. And I'm like, really? You like it? And here I am, like, I've been doing this for years. And then when you really like put your own work out there in published format, you're just kind of like twiddling your thumbs. You're thinking, could I get a prescription for Xanax? I think they might give me some. I don't know. And then you finally hear stuff back and you're like, oh, they like me. Okay. So that's why it's so important for people to review books. Like, you have to write reviews. You have to like put stuff out there. It really helps authors so much, and it helps build their confidence. Negative reviews is another conversation, but the positive reviews really help to give authors confidence.
But to your point about negative reviews, they actually, sometimes it's also an indicator of saying, maybe this wasn't this person who read this book. Thank you for the feedback, but perhaps this book was not a right match from an audience standpoint.
Sure.
So sometimes that idea of it, if it's targeted appropriately, if it's written for the right audience, then it could also be saying, okay, this is doing its job because it is pushing away who it's not for, and it's attracting who it is for, just like messaging.
Yeah. And I've written a lot about, like, in my email newsletter specifically about reviews, because I have this weird thing where I desperately want a 1-star review and I haven't gotten one yet. Like, I want not just a rating, but like, I want the review. I want to find somebody who just like hates my work. I know that sounds weird, but I am really into celebrating your negative reviews. That is a big badge of honor in the author world. I've seen authors just cry over negative reviews, and I'm like, do you even know this person? Well, no. And I'm like, what? You have like 50 other amazing 4 and 5-star reviews, and you're this upset because you got a negative review and it's someone you don't even know. Whoa, it's just really upsetting. It's my first one. I'm like, this is crazy. You do not need to be this upset over negative review. I even posted a tweet today where it showed in the same week I got a 2-star review and a 5-star review. It was like within 5 days of each other. Writing is subjective. Like, of course, there's going to be people who don't like your work. That doesn't mean you stop writing. In fact, if you do a little bit of extra research, there are some of the craziest reviews out there. Like, I still have this pulled up, but I thought you might want to hear it because it. Okay. All right, here we go. I'm going to try not to laugh through this. This is a review by Granville Hicks, writing in the Saturday Review in the year 1960. Are you ready to hear this? It's gonna make you feel better. Miss Harper Lee's problem has been to tell the story she wants to tell, and yet to stay within the consciousness of a child, and she hasn't consistently solved it. That was a negative review for To Kill a Mockingbird. Like, your favorite book in the entire world has negative reviews. Don't let that ruin your whole day. It's not worth it.
Exactly. So speaking of books, I know you have published several and in multiple genres.
Yeah.
So what is it like moving through the different genres?
I love it, because that's what I love about self-publishing. You know, I don't have to be pigeonholed. I can write whatever I want. And there's always this idea of, well, won't your science fiction people be like, I don't want to read your poetry? Yeah, I don't care. I'm not going to write science fiction for the rest of my life. And you would be surprised to find how many of my readers for like the Suicide Tree or the 10 Commandments love the poetry book, and the poetry people found out I had this, and oh, I love that. I can't write in the same genre for the rest of my life. That's just not who I am, and I'm not going to do it. As far as any struggles you might have with it, I feel like I'm the wrong person for this because I haven't had any struggles. I think it's a lie. I think it's just this fallacy that's been put in the publishing industry. You have to write the same genre because if you go do something else, you're going to confuse your people. No, I'm not. If anything, I'm going to get them to fall in love with another genre they didn't know they loved, or most likely probably did love, because believe it or not, sci-fi readers also read other genres. And so I think it's just this big lie. I think it's meant to keep people stuck in this one place. And I just don't get that. Like, I think a lot of people forget that, like, let's do the Hunger Games, okay? Hunger Games is, oh my goodness, I have two different Myers in my head and they're both wrong. What is the author of the Hunger Games?
Suzanne Collins.
Thank you.
Welcome.
People forget that Suzanne Collins worked on the children's TV show Little Bear, a show for little tiny kids about like love and acceptance and compassion. And then here she is like writing a book where she shoves a bunch of teenagers in a field and tells them to kill themselves. Like, yeah, it's okay to get out of your genre. Shirley Jackson, who is one of my favorite authors in the world, here she is writing like a horror novel that Stephen King says to this day scares the pants off of him. She did children's books too.
That's right.
You don't have to write in one genre. Wouldn't that make you crazy? That make me crazy.
I'm writing multiple genres, so I love that.
I love the challenge. And like, I also love, it's just me. Like, that's how I am. And my boyfriend has made this joke recently where he goes, you know what I love about you? And I'm like, what? And he goes, within the same week, you will hand me a love poem and say, what do you think about this? And then hand me a draft of your cannibal short story and ask for feedback. I'm like, yeah, I do that. He's like, it's so weird, but I love it. And it's true. Like, I am working on a cannibal short story, and then I'm working on a thriller, and then like,
love it.
Fine. It's so much fun to do that. So if you're out there and you're thinking like, hey, I want to do different genres, should I do, you know what you usually hear, should I do a pen name? You know, I'm going to write YA over here, and then I want to do, let's say, romance. Should I get a pen name? And I'm like, I mean, I'm not going to say no to it necessarily, but are you going to get a new pen name? Are you going to have two different websites, two different social media accounts, two different email news? Like, that is exhausting. I don't have time for that. I know authors who do it, and I think it's great that you are. The only thing I can come up with is they're addicted to cocaine, because there's no way that you can do all of that with normal energy. There's no way. And I just, please don't feel like you have to do, oh, I have to have a pen name for each genre. Okay, let me help you with that. When you do that and you have a website for each pen name, that is a yearly hosting fee of whatever you're going to pay. That is yearly domain name, whatever. If you have an email address associated with that, like mine is hello@ShaylaRaquel.com, that's another cost. Like, maybe that would help people if I talked about that. Hey, before you do that, just realize you're doubling the cost.
It's the maintenance, and it's the presence. It's its own brand. And so, to your point, you have a book about the 10 commandments for authors, among other books that you have. Would you, as we're sitting here kind of discussing branding in this own piece?
Yeah, let's just get into it. I do, and I had a lot of fun writing this book too. It was my easiest book to write.
Why was it so fun?
It was just such an accident. And so it was the year 2018, and we were doing with my writers group, when it's November, every single Saturday we have a write-in at the coffee shop for my writers group for National Novel Writing Month, and we're there for 3 hours. It's just a table of caffeinated writers. It's very scary. And here I am several days into NaNoWriMo, because I was going to do a collection of creative nonfiction short stories, and it just wasn't clicking. And I didn't know why. And I'm like, oh no, I messed up. Like, I'm losing all these days. What am I going to do? And then I'm sitting there at the write-in, and I'm like, I'm just going to switch genres. Let me just think about this. And I started playing around with this idea of like, what if I wrote a book to help people with their marketing? I've been blogging about it for, by this point, it would have been 3 years, 3 solid years of blogging about, well, I guess almost 4. And then I was like, okay, I'm just, you know what, let me just poke around my blog posts and my email newsletters. Let me see if I even have any content. Before you know it, I'm just copying and pasting, and there's just 20,000 words already. And I'm like, oh, well, I'm ahead of NaNoWriMo now, you know? And I look at it and I'm like, this is so great. I can work with this. And I started playing around with, well, what are these? You know, are these rules? Are they, what is it? And I just kept coming back to commandments, because I loved that word because it was so strong and scary and biblical. But when you read the book, it's all about like authenticity, and I write in a conversational style. And I liked that it was this big fat archaic type thing. And then I decided, no, like it's going to be fun. Just hang out with me. This is going to be fun. And so it was easy because I had so much of the content already, years of writing it, I guess. And so I went from November 2018 to October 2019, and I had the book published. So it wasn't even a full year, which was really cool because the Suicide Tree took like 3.5 years. And it felt nice to be able to just, oh wow, this got done a lot quicker than I thought. And I do think it's like that with nonfiction. I will fight to the death on that. Nonfiction is easier to write than novels. I will fight people on that. It is easier, but I had a blast with it. It was just really fun. And exciting news, I am releasing a bonus commandment on public and virtual speaking. The deal was, if I got 100 Amazon reviews for the 10 commandments of author branding, I would release it to my email newsletter people first. And as of today, I have 101. So I owe my email newsletter people a bonus commandment.
That is awesome. I love that. So if that is appealing to listeners, I hope that they definitely sign up on your list to
They are
collect the
going to want
bonus
it.
too. Yes.
I've been writing about public speaking too, so that makes you feel good when you copy and paste. You're like, I already have 4,000 words in this document. You know, that helps you a lot for sure. So I'm very excited about this one because public speaking is just a blast for me. It is so fun.
That is cool. That is so, so cool. So
Yeah.
your book of poetry is your most recent release. What inspired this one? Yeah, that's such a gorgeous cover.
Melinda Martin did both of these covers here. Melinda Martin Publishing Services, and she also handles my formatting. She's a genius, absolute genius. Okay, so how did the poetry come into the world? Once again, a little bit of an accident. So, because it wasn't ever really planned that way. I've been writing poetry my entire life, but I've never really showed it off. It's just been something I do as a cathartic thing, you know. And so it was December 11th, 2018, and my family and the church family, everyone, we lost a 17-year-old to a car wreck, and she was going to turn 18 in March, just, you know, and then that January, the very next month, she was going to graduate from cosmetology school. And I'd known her since she was 10. Her name was Lauren, and she was just like my little sister. And I just took her everywhere, and we just did everything together for years. You know, it was just fun doting on her and spending money on her. And so when we lost her, our family, their family, the church, it was just a grief unlike anything that any of us had ever experienced. It was just, no one had ever experienced a loss like that before, especially, you know, she's 17, and it was just awful. So in order for me to try to like deal with this grief that I've never, and of course I've been around death, you know, I've been around to funerals, I've lost my grandparents. This was just a totally different type of feeling. So I would write poetry about it. And I was writing poetry about her and the things that I wish I would have told her. Like, why didn't I tell her these things? I thought I had more time, you know. And I wrote a poem about like the day of her funeral. And I didn't really, I had these things for a while. And then what I did is I finally was like, well, I'm going to share this with people because this was me learning about grief for the first time. And so I started sharing some of the poems on my Medium account just to see like I wanted her family to be able to have them if they wanted to print them or whatever. And then, you know, other things started happening. There was love and there was heartache and there was anger and there was so many things going on in my life for the last 2 years. So again, as I said, an accident. And because I had these poems, and then I was like, I think I want to publish these. Do I want to do that? I think I do. And so the title came from the very first poem, which was literally called All the Things I Should Have Told You. And it was about Lauren. So when you read the book of poetry, you'll notice that it starts out with quite a few love poems. And then it gets hit with poems on grief. And then it gets hit with poems on anger. And then you come back to love again. And one of my really good friends, Heidi Thorne, she is so awesome. She does the Heidi Thorne show. She has a podcast. She's awesome in the self-publishing world. She noted in her Amazon review that, well, why weren't all the love poems grouped together in one part? And it was actually like such awesome feedback, because I realized I need to make an update in my author's note to explain that, because I fell in love again down the road. And then it ended with resilience. So the love poems aren't grouped together because that wasn't how it happened. And then, you know, you'll see poems in there about just coming to terms with the fact that Lauren's gone. And I was shocked at how many people related to the poems on grief. That was really shocking, because it's so personal. Like, grief is so personal and intimate for each individual. So how can you take a poem that's about this specific person, and how can somebody else read it and think about it did? That's just how it happened. And so it was really good for me to be able to get that poetry out there as a way to tell other people, yeah, these are your intimate, from the heart, from the soul moments. And yeah, I did write pretty much most of these while in the moment and crying and sad. But isn't that kind of the whole thing about being an author, is to tell the truth? Yeah, even novelists, like that's our job. And I think if you're not willing to be vulnerable and transparent, you're really missing out on helping other people through your writing. So that's how that came about. I guess I have a lot of Bob Ross happy accidents with my with my books, but that's what happened. And of course, you know, I dedicated the book to her and gave it to her family. And so it was just, it was hard to do, but it had so many good outcomes. It really did.
But it also shows just what a person goes through, because
Yeah.
there was love before something happened. And then there is grief and anger. And that's a part of that healing too, which
Absolutely.
does.
Yeah.
And when you can find a way to look at something and make it better and not bitter, love does come through with that. So to me, it's
Yeah.
also about that transformation that can happen.
Exactly. It's a metamorphosis for sure.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly how I'm processing that. And I find that absolutely beautiful, because because that's just something that you never really know how much you can touch someone, because you've shared something so vulnerable or so personal. And then, and when somebody else goes, you see me, you understand that.
Yeah.
That ripple effect is amazing.
Really weird. Like, some of the ones that people picked as their favorites. Cause I was like, really? One of the ones that got a lot of attention, which I don't know, I guess it just surprised me. I want to get the exact title, because I mean, of course I know all the titles of my poems and I would never forget them, but just in case I get it a little incorrect. One of them was, When We Planned Your Funeral. And it's kind of weird how that one came. This is so important, guys. Take advantage of every moment. Yeah, like, this is going to sound really weird, but when I was in the room with Lauren's parents at the funeral home with the funeral director, we were planning her funeral. So, because I was supposed to write the obituary and stuff like that. So there's a good 20 minutes where my opinion was like, I didn't need to talk, because they were just talking to the parents about whatever. And so you're sitting there, and I have my notes app up, and I don't know what made me do it, but I just started writing down. There's a mini fridge humming. The funeral director is wearing these gold rimmed glasses, and this is the way that Lauren's mom is sitting and this is what they're doing. And one, it helped me like not break down. I could just sit there and type on my phone. I didn't write the poem for that until like 2 years later or a year and a half, something like that. But by taking advantage of that space and just writing down these words and like where I was and the setting and what the mood was, I don't know why, but a ton of people resonated with that poem. And it's not like I used any fancy words or anything. I think it was just like, yeah, you do have to sit in a room with this long table with this funeral director you don't know, and you have to just figure out what your daughter is going to wear. Like, how do you do that? And so it was interesting to see how many people related to that poem.
You know, it sounds to me like you created a almost like a friend who looked like grief, who could hold that other person's hand to say, hey, I'm here. I get
Yeah.
what you're going through, and you don't have to go through that alone. And I think
No.
that's courageous and beautiful. And thank you for writing such a moving
Thank you.
and vulnerable piece, because that was vulnerable. No one said you had to share it, and you chose
No.
to, and that was courageous. And that's exactly the kind of thing that I think is so important about this particular show, is to show those exact things. So
Should. You
Shayla,
should be
thank you.
vulnerable.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much.
I do just want to encourage people, like, yeah, you are going to have some really vulnerable moments, but can you imagine like what it would do for other people if you were vulnerable and you were transparent and you wrote and shared things that have happened to you in your life? Because it can feel very lonely in this world. And I think being able to see that from somebody else and to know, oh my goodness, if I wanted to, I could reach out to Shayla and ask her some questions about grief. She would answer me, and I would, and I have. So I think that's another thing that goes even beyond your writing. Like, there are people, when you talk about certain things, they're probably going to reach out to you and say like, hey, you talked about domestic abuse, you talked about human trafficking, you talked about the death penalty. I have some questions. Can I ask you about them? Yes, of course you can. So then you have this dialogue. Writing's awesome like that. Books create all sorts of conversations.
I wholeheartedly agree. Oh my goodness. So I believe you have something coming out later this year. Is that correct?
I have a couple of some things coming out later this year.
Awesome. Awesome. Awesome.
Which one are you interested in?
Whichever you would like to share, if you want to give a quick teaser.
I've got like 3 really cool things coming out. Okay. So the 10 commandments of author branding has the commandment, the bonus commandment, right? But I'm also updating it for the year 2021. And I'm re-releasing it in hardcover. So that's going to be super cool. By the way, I made this announcement in my writers group. This is so funny. So there was like maybe 12 of us or something that night. And we do this segment called Tell Me Something Good. I like the song. And so it came to me and I raised my hand. And before I could say what my good thing was, one of the other writers goes, your engagement, is that it? And the other person who was leading it, she said, oh, we already covered that at the last workshop. He goes, oh, okay. And I said, actually, I was just going to say that. And nobody made it. You have to understand, like, he said, oh, you got engaged, right? And then everyone was just smiling. And then all of a sudden I said, actually, I was just going to say that I'm going to re-release my book in hardcover. You hear 12 writers go, yeah. And we were just dying of laughter. I'm like, that is the most writer thing ever. Hi, I'm engaged. Neat. Gonna have my book in hardcover. Yes! And they're all just like losing it. Like, I was afraid a mosh pit was gonna get started. So that was the first cool thing. The second thing is I am releasing my short story called Savage Indulgence. I already hinted at what that was about. I am debating on if I want to release it on Kindle Vella, which releases for readers in a week. And I really kind of want to do it, but I'm not sure. I'd like to be an early adopter and see how that works. And then finally, this has been going on for a long time, the research aspect of it, but I've been working on a psychological thriller for a long time. And this is definitely like my magnum opus type thing. So I am very, very deep in research and have been, and then I haven't done anything for like a few months because I got the short story idea. You know how it is with writers. So I've got a lot coming up, and oh yeah, and then I'm getting married, so got to balance all that. I'm sure I'll
So
figure it
fun.
out. It'll be fine.
That is
I'll figure it out.
awesome. Shayla, this has been such a blast. I've had so much fun with you. Would you please tell our listeners where they can connect with you and
Yeah.
where they can get your books?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So you can just go to ShaylaRaquel.com, and I'm sure you'll leave them notes for that. But I'm everywhere. I love Instagram. You can find me at Shayla Lee Raquel, because somebody else already had Shayla Raquel and they wouldn't give it up. And you can find me on Twitter with the same hashtag. And I love TikTok, and I love Pinterest and LinkedIn. I'm not really on Facebook all that much, but I would love it if you guys would actually sign up for my newsletter, because you get quite a lot of cool stuff. You get the pre-publishing checklist for free, which is really cool. And you get novel binder printables, which are really fun for NaNoWriMo. You get a lot of cool stuff. And then I just try really, really, really hard to send top-notch quality content in my newsletter. I spend hours on that thing. So you are not going to be stuck with, oh, I got my freebie, but her newsletter sucks. I promise it's good. And you can find all of that on my website really easily. Shayla Raquel.
Awesome. Shayla, thank you so, so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me.